It was supposed to be the perfect getaway. Sarah Carter was tired. The constant grind of her 9-to-5 job, her never-ending list of responsibilities, the overwhelming noise of city life, all of it had worn her thin. So, when she stumbled across a last-minute ad for a charming bed and breakfast in the countryside, she couldn't resist. A weekend of peace, a break from the chaos of the world. Just her in the quiet, nothing more. The advertisement boasted about the house's history, the quiet, and the remote location. A picture-perfect retreat to reset. They said, the Hollowbrook House. It was called secluded, picturesque, and peaceful. It seemed like the answer to her prayers. The moment she arrived, though, a sense of unease crept over her, though she couldn't put her finger on why. The house was beautiful, no doubt about that. Set far off the beaten path, surrounded by thick, dark woods, Hollowbrook House stood tall and proud, its Victorian architecture dating back more than a century. It was regal in its decay, a sprawling mansion with high, arched windows and a stone facade covered in creeping ivy. The owner, a woman named Eleanor, was a quiet, middle-aged figure who greeted Sarah with a friendly but strangely distant smile. She seemed polite enough, though her eyes flickered nervously as she handed over the keys. Everything's ready for your stay, dear. Please make yourself at home, Eleanor said with practiced warmth, her voice just a little too calm. And if you need anything at all, don't hesitate to ask. Her words seemed hollow, the smile never quite reaching her eyes. But Sarah, eager to escape her hectic life, dismissed the feeling and followed the woman inside. The house felt ancient. The furniture was dark, upholstered in velvets and brocades that hadn't been in style for decades. The air inside was thick with dust, but oddly, the scent was comforting, like old books and forgotten memories. The wallpaper was faded and peeling, and there was a quiet hum in the air, as if the house itself had been alive for longer than anyone cared to admit. When Sarah made her way upstairs to her room, she felt a sudden chill crawl up her spine. The staircase creaked beneath her feet, but with groaning and protest with every step. She paused at the top, looking down the long hallway toward the other rooms. Something about the space made her feel watched, but when she glanced around, no one was there. She shrugged off the feeling. It was just nerves. She was tired after all. She'd be fine. Sarah wasn't the only one who had been lured by the promise of a weekend retreat. Mark and Claire, a friend from work, arrived late that afternoon. They, too, had been looking for a place to unwind. Mark, a stockbroker, and Claire, a graphic designer, were the type of people who thrived on energy and excitement. A staycation was supposed to help them recharge, but their idea of relaxing was, as Sarah would put it, slightly different from hers. They brought their own set of expectations for the weekend. The moment they arrived, Mark gave the house a critical glance. Claire, on the other hand, seemed immediately enchanted, snapping pictures on her phone of the sprawling lawn and elegant front porch. This place is old, Mark said, his tone laced with doubt. I mean, it's really old. Exactly, Claire replied with a smile. That's the charm of it. It's quaint. Mark wasn't convinced. But when Eleanor greeted them, her polite smile and warm voice managed to calm his nerves. She led them inside, showing them the sitting room with its worn-out chairs, dark with bookshelves and old paintings that hung crookedly on the walls. Sarah was already there, sipping a cup of tea in the grand parlor. The moment Mark and Claire entered, she noticed their reactions. Mark looked uncomfortable, while Claire seemed enamored by the house's charm. Claire's eyes wandered over the paintings, the old chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, and the faded tapestries that lined the walls. So you guys feel it too, right? Mark asked Sarah in a hushed voice as they stood off to the side. This place feels off. Sarah forced a smile. You're just tired from the drive. I think this place is fine. It's just... I don't know, Mark interrupted. Something about it just doesn't sit right. I can't quite explain it. But before Sarah could answer, Eleanor reappeared, leading them to their rooms. The house felt darker as the sun set, the long shadows stretching farther, the rooms colder. It was a strange feeling of isolation, like they were all alone in a place that had seen better days. Get some rest, Eleanor said before leaving them to settle in. I'll have breakfast ready for you in the morning. Night fell over Hollowbrook House quickly, the dense forest outside swallowing any remaining light. The temperature inside the house dropped, and the flickering lights in the hallway cast strange shadows across the walls. The wind picked up outside, howling against the windows. Sarah lay in bed, wide awake, unable to shake the strange feeling that had settled over her. The house was too quiet. The hum of the air, the creaks in the wood. Everything felt like it was alive, watching her, waiting. Suddenly, she heard it, a soft thud. It came from upstairs, faint but clear. It was like something had dropped, a piece of furniture, or maybe a book, rolling across the floor. Sarah sat up, listening intently. Another thud, closer this time. The sound came again, and this time it was louder, followed by a creaking, like footsteps on the floorboards above her. "Claire?" Sarah whispered, trying to call out to her friend in the adjacent room, but the words wouldn't come. The thuds grew louder and Sarah's heart raced. She stood, grabbed her phone, and crept into the hallway. The temperature had dropped even further. As she moved cautiously toward the stairs, she glanced around, her eyes scanning the darkness. Suddenly, she heard a loud crash. BM, from upstairs. She jumped back, a cold sweat breaking out across her forehead. Her first instinct was to run back to her room and lock the door, but she couldn't. Something was happening. Something was wrong. She moved toward the staircase, her body trembling, the silence of the house pressing in on her. She was halfway up the stairs when she heard it. A voice. "Help me?" It was a whisper, faint but unmistakable. It came from above her. Sarah froze. The next morning, the group sat around the breakfast table, trying to shake off the unease of the night before. Eleanor served them a simple breakfast, toast, eggs, and fresh fruit, but none of them ate much. Mark had been restless. He hadn't slept well, and his irritation was growing. "I don't care what anyone says. This house is haunted. There's something wrong here," he muttered under his breath, pushing his food around. "What do you mean, haunted?" Claire asked, her voice light and amused. "It's just an old house. Nothing to be afraid of." But Mark wasn't convinced. "I heard footsteps last night, upstairs, moving around like someone was walking." Claire looked skeptical. "It's just the house settling, Mark. It's ancient." But Mark couldn't shake it off. He grabbed his jacket and headed out, deciding to explore the house further. Sarah, feeling equally uneasy, followed him. They came across an old, locked door in the back of the house, a door that neither of them had seen the night before. The rusted brass handle was cold, but there was no sign of Eleanor. "Should we open it?" Sarah asked, her voice low. Mark's fingers grazed the handle, and with a creak, the door opened. They both stepped into the room, and what they found made their blood run cold. The room was suffocating. The air felt thick, almost alive, as if it were pressing down on Sarah and Mark. The room felt warped, the shadows in the corners seeming to bend and twist, as though the very space around them was being stretched beyond its natural limits. And then there was the mirror. The glass had been hidden beneath the old cloth, but now, with it exposed, the house seemed to hum with an ancient energy. The dull, tarnished frame gleamed faintly under the flickering light, as though it were calling to them. The whispers grew louder in Sarah's mind, louder than before. Come closer to me." Mark, entranced by the mirror's presence, reached out without a word, his fingers hovering inches from the surface. The hairs on Sarah's neck stood on end as she watched him, unsure whether to stop him or not. Something felt terribly wrong about this moment. "Mark, please don't." Sarah's voice was shaky, but before she could stop him, Mark's hand touched the glass. The moment his skin made contact with the mirror, everything in the room seemed to shift. The air grew colder, heavier. A strange vibration filled the room, the kind of low hum that rattled your bones. It was as though the house itself was breathing. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest as she watched the reflection in the glass. At first, nothing happened. It seemed like a normal mirror, reflecting the dusty room behind them. But then, the image in the mirror moved. The figures inside, their own reflections, twitched and stretched unnaturally. Mark's face in the mirror didn't quite match his movements. It stayed frozen, eyes wide, staring straight ahead. while his body in the real world continued to reach out to the mirror. A deep, resonating voice filled the room, but it wasn't Mark's. It wasn't even a single voice. It was many voices, layered over one another, whispering, murmuring, begging, pleading. Come closer. Join us. Forever. Mark's expression twisted in confusion. He looked back at Sarah, his eyes wide, a strange light in them. Sarah. Before Sarah could respond, the mirror began to pull at him. It wasn't like the glass was shattering. No, it was far worse than that. The mirror had become a living thing. It didn't break. It absorbed him. Sarah screamed as she saw Mark's body being drawn toward the mirror. His hands gripped at the frame, his legs slipping beneath him. His body sucked forward like it was caught in a current. The glass rippled like water, waves of liquid motion swirling in the once still surface. No. Mark, no. Sarah lunged forward, grabbing his arm with all her strength. She pulled with every ounce of energy she had, but it was no use. Mark's fingers were now sinking into the surface of the mirror, his body being dragged inch by inch, deeper and deeper into the reflection. He was fading, his body stretching unnaturally, becoming translucent like smoke. His screams filled the room, but his mouth moved slowly, as though he were underwater. Help me, Sarah. Mark's voice was distorted, like he was speaking from behind a veil, barely audible over the maddening whispers from the mirror. With one final pull, Mark's form disappeared completely into the mirror, leaving nothing but a faint outline of his presence in the now still reflection. The mirror went silent. The room went silent. For a moment, everything was still. Sarah's breath was loud in her ears, her heart beating furiously as she looked around in panic, not knowing where to run or what to do. The room, once filled with an oppressive energy, now felt empty, as though something had been taken away, leaving only a hollow space behind. Her hand hovered in the air, trembling. The mirror was still there, reflecting the room behind her, but something was different now. The air around her was colder. A shadow shifted in the reflection, a shadow that wasn't hers. It moved in the mirror, silently, and then she saw it. A figure, standing behind her. It was Mark. His eyes were no longer wide with panic, but empty, hollow, like he was no longer truly there. His lips curled into a grin that stretched unnaturally wide, his teeth too sharp, too pointed. His body seemed almost translucent now, his movements jerky, like a puppet on a string. Sarah. Her name came from his mouth, but it wasn't his voice anymore. It was layered with something ancient, something sinister. The reflection of Mark in the mirror twisted, his grin growing wider, more grotesque. No, this can't be happening. Mark. Sarah whispered, stepping backward, her body trembling. Mark, please come back. But Mark in the mirror didn't move like he had before. This time, he didn't just stay still. He stepped forward, one slow, deliberate step after another, until he was right up against the glass. Join me, he hissed, his voice now a chorus of distorted, ethereal sounds. We are waiting. Sarah stumbled backward, hitting the floor as the force in the mirror surged forward, pulling her toward the glass. The voices, now louder and more urgent, screamed in her mind. Join us forever. She reached out for the frame, her fingers brushing against it, but the mirror's surface was no longer just glass. It was alive. It was cold, wet like skin. She recoiled, heart pounding in her chest, her hand pulling back as it burned. But then, as she turned to flee, something stopped her. The door. It was locked. She had to get out. She had to escape. But the air in the room was thick now, suffocating. The mirror's whispers grew louder, the glass pulling her toward it. Her breath was shallow, desperate. She looked back at the mirror. Mark's reflection stepped out of the glass. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she turned back to the mirror. Mark was no longer trapped inside the glass. He had stepped out, but he wasn't Mark anymore. His form was twisted, distorted, like something had crawled out of the darkest corners of the world and taken on his shape. His eyes were black pits, voids that seemed to suck in all light around him. His skin was pale, sickly, stretched too tight over his bones. His mouth was twisted into an unnatural grin, his teeth sharp and pointed, gleaming like knives. "Sarah." The voice that came from his mouth was not his own. It was layered with something ancient, something deeply unsettling. It echoed, as if there were many voices speaking in unison, all of them hungry. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest, panic clawing at her throat. Mark, her friend, her companion, was gone, and in his place was this thing, this creature, born from the depths of the mirror's curse. "Mark," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Please, you have to snap out of it. Come back." The creature, the reflection of Mark, tilted its head, the grin widening even further, stretching almost impossibly. The sharp teeth gleamed, as though mocking her. "It's too late," the creature hissed. "You're all part of it now. We all are. We belong to the darkness." The room grew colder. The shadows around her seemed to press in closer, thickening and swirling like smoke. The mirror, still cracked and broken in places, was no longer just reflecting the room. It had become a portal, a window to a nightmare world, a world where the dead moved and spoke. The creature took a slow step toward her, its eyes never leaving her face. Each step seemed to ripple the air, distorting the space around it. With every inch it moved, Sarah's fear deepened. She backed up, her heels catching on the floor as she scrambled toward the door. But it was locked. The door would not budge. "No!" she screamed, tugging at the handle, desperate to escape. The creature's laugh was low and guttural, a sound that chilled her to the bone. "You think you can leave?" Its voice was no longer Mark's. It was a voice of something far older, far darker, a voice that had been twisted by time and suffering. The reflection in the mirror flickered, and then Mark's face appeared again, but now it was distorted, stretched, a grotesque mockery of the man he had once been. "Sarah," the creature crooned, "you should have never come here." Sarah could feel her strength waning as the air around her thickened. Her mind raced. She had to think. She had to find a way out. But the house felt alive now, the walls pressing in on her, the shadows stretching toward her like fingers, ready to pull her in. Suddenly, the house seemed to groan. The floor beneath her feet trembled, and the walls seemed to shift. The room distorted, stretching and bending, as though reality itself was warping around the cursed mirror. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, filling the air with an unbearable pressure. Something was wrong. Something had been unleashed. The creature's grin widened as it reached out toward her, its hand moving unnaturally fast. Its fingers were long, twisted, claw-like. With a flick of its wrist, it knocked over a nearby lamp, casting an eerie light across the room. Shadows leapt to life, crawling along the walls, swirling toward her like a tidal wave. "Sarah," it whispered, its voice low and sinister. "Come to me. Join us." Her breath came in ragged gasps as she stumbled backward, her fingers clawing at the door, still uselessly trying to turn the lock knob. Her mind screamed for escape, but there was nowhere to go. The room was closing in on her. The creature was nearly upon her now, its presence suffocating, like the walls themselves were moving closer. And then, just as the creature's cold fingers grazed her arm, she heard it, a loud crash. The sound came from the hallway outside. It echoed through the house, reverberating off the walls. The creature paused, its dark, empty eyes flicking toward the source of the noise. Its grin faltered, just for a moment, before it tilted its head again. "Who's there?" it growled. The creature turned its back to Sarah, its attention momentarily diverted. This was her chance. With all the strength she had left, Sarah grabbed the nearest object, a heavy iron candlestick from a nearby shelf. She swung it at the door's lock with everything she had. The metal clanged against the wood, sending a shock of pain through her arms, but the lock didn't break. Frustration boiled inside her as she swung again, harder this time, and with a loud snap, the lock gave. The door flung open and she bolted through it, stumbling into the dark hallway, her legs giving way beneath her. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. As she ran down the hall, the whispers grew louder. The creature's laughter echoed behind her, but she didn't dare look back. She had to keep moving, had to keep running. The house was alive, and it wanted her. She reached the stairs, her breath ragged, her pulse roaring in her ears. But just as she was about to sprint up them, the walls seemed to bend. The air shifted, and then something grabbed her ankle. Sarah's blood ran cold as she felt the grip tighten around her ankle, dragging her deeper into the bowels of the house. Her heart pounded against her chest as she kicked and struggled, her fingers scrabbling at the wooden floorboards in a desperate attempt to stop herself from being dragged further into the darkness. The whispers from the walls seemed to grow louder, twisting in her ears, promising her doom. The air around her was freezing, the temperature plummeting as she felt herself slipping backward, inch by inch. The shadows themselves were alive, crawling across the floor, reaching for her. No, she fought harder, kicking with all the strength she could muster. Her foot slammed into the floorboards, causing a sharp pain to shoot up her leg. But it didn't matter. The hand on her ankle was unyielding, cold as ice and impossibly strong. It felt like the very house itself was holding her back. "Help!" she screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the oppressive silence. There was no answer. "I can't let this happen." With a final burst of adrenaline, she slammed her other foot into the floor, twisting her body in a desperate maneuver. Her fingers grasped something, anything, and her nails dug into the wooden planks beneath her. She tore at the floor with all the desperation of someone fighting for their life. Her breathing was ragged, her vision blurry from panic, but she felt something shift beneath her hands. The grip loosened just a fraction. That was all she needed. She wrenched her body forward, the force of her movement jerking her free from the icy hand that had claimed her. Sarah didn't wait to look back. She ran, her legs moving faster than they ever had before, her breath ragged in her chest. The hallway ahead of her was a blur. The shadows stretched and twisted around her, reaching out as if they were alive, eager to pull her back into their grasp. She could hear the scraping behind her, the sound of something large, something horrible, following her every move. Her eyes darted to the door at the end of the hall, her only hope of escape. But the door seemed so far away. The house was alive. It was playing with her, toying with her terror, slowing her down, pushing her to the brink of despair. The house creaked and groaned like a living, breathing thing, its walls shifting and closing around her. She could feel the cold tendrils of the darkness curling up around her ankles, her legs, threatening to drag her down again. "Sarah," the voice, soft and mocking, came from behind her. It was Mark's voice, but it wasn't Mark anymore. It was layered with something else, something dark, something wrong. She dared to glance over her shoulder, and in that fleeting moment, she saw him, Mark, standing in the hallway, his face a twisted mask of darkness and malice. His eyes were black voids, his smile far too wide, and the shadows around him seemed to writhe and pulse like living things. "You can't escape," the voice whispered, its tone dark and unnatural. "The house is hungry, and so are we." Sarah screamed and turned away, her heart pounding in her throat as she threw herself at the door. She grabbed the handle with trembling hands, desperate to escape the horrors that were chasing her. She twisted it, pulled, but the door didn't open. It was locked. She couldn't get out. The sound of footsteps came behind her, slow, deliberate, and heavy. The creature that had once been Mark was coming closer, its grin widening with each step. The walls of the house seemed to close in even tighter, the hallway growing smaller, the ceiling lowering, the air thickening. It's too late. It's all over. Her mind screamed at her, but she refused to listen. She would not let this house consume her. In a final, desperate act, Sarah slammed her body against the door again and again, her shoulders slamming into the cold wood. Each hit reverberated through her body, but the door refused to open. The shadows closed in. The air became suffocating, a choking force that clung to her, tightening around her throat. But then, something shifted. A noise, a crack. The door splintered under the pressure, and with a final, explosive movement, it burst open. The light from outside flooded into the dark hallway, washing over Sarah as she stumbled forward, her heart racing. But there was no escape. Mark's twisted form reached out for her, his fingers stretching toward her with an impossible, unnatural speed. She had no time to react. His grip closed around her wrist with bone-crushing force. "You're mine now," he whispered, his voice deep and hollow, like the sound of 1,000 dead voices. The air around her went cold. The ground beneath her feet seemed to fall away. And in that moment, the house seemed to swallow her whole. And then there was nothing,